This is Ross Payton with Night Clerk Radio, a new podcast that I'm wanting to start up with my new co-host here.
Hey, this is Birk. How's it going?
This is going to be a music review podcast focused on Vaporwave, dark ambient, and other weird subgenres of music. This is a project Birk and I have been talking about for a while now, and now that Birk is here in town, we wanted to record a little preamble to sort of get our mission statement, our thesis about Night Clerk Radio. Night Clerk Radio is, of course, sort of a reference to the Night Clerk, a game I ran on Role-Playing Public Radio about a spooky haunted hotel. And I'd imagine the Night Clerk of that hotel would be listening to spooky, weird music as they work late into the night. This is going to be a music review podcast. I have been interested in Vaporwave since 2014, and I've been interested in weird music for a very long time. And the thing about all this music that's being released now is I, get new music for Role-Playing Public Radio and the Mix 6, and I see so much out there. There's so many artists releasing great stuff out there that it kind of makes me, it does make me very sad to know that it's not being appreciated, that people aren't aware of it. I know a lot of listeners of my podcast have been like, oh, I started listening to Vaporwave because of you, because you told me about it. I'm aware of it. I'm like, oh, well, maybe I could do something about that and just raise awareness of hey, there's all this cool, weird music that is being produced by truly independent artists, working out in their bedrooms or basements or abandoned malls or what have you.
We are truly in a very fortunate era of just free access to democratic media without anybody telling people what to make. And it's really fascinating to see what people will do.
Yeah, I mean,
in that situation.
Yeah, there is, because I remember as an example of that, a couple of years ago, someone found this huge archive of cassettes that were played for Kmart's in the 80s and 90s, and they digitized all of them, put them all online. And I know at least a couple of people have made Vaporwave albums sampling that stuff.
Oh yeah, the Kmart tapes are.
Yeah, the Kmart tapes. I mean, they're the Kmart tapes.
The Kmart tapes.
And so before we get into describing what is Vaporwave or getting into theory, stuff like that, we should probably get into a little bit about why we're interested in it. But I've been talking for a little bit, so Birch.
Sure, yeah. So I'm in the same boat where I've always just loved weird media. It's always been so much more interesting to me in a lot of ways. So Vaporwave, I actually stumbled onto it through kind of maybe an unusual path through chiptunes, like video game music or original music made using original video game hardware. Like people would buy NESs and reprogram the sound chips to make their own music.
Oh yeah. Yeah, chiptune is really popular. There's one artist I like, Saber Pulse. Yeah.
And I had a friend who's very, very into it. And we'll talk about this more in the future, but he introduced me to an album called Echo Jams, which is kind of like Echo the Dolphin video game, kind of like adjacent album.
Yeah.
So it's a very natural extension from weird video game music to weird other music.
Yeah. So you were aware of Vaporwave before you were an RPPR fan or whatever?
Roughly, actually, probably the same time, because Echo Jams came out in 2010.
Oh, yeah.
And the first RPPR actual play I listened to was Night Clerk.
Oh,
so this is really come full circle in a weird way.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Nice. It was meant to be.
It was destiny.
Yeah. For me, I've always been interested in weird music, certainly playing Super Nintendo games and Sega Genesis games, and TurboGrafx, all those, that generation of games. Those soundtracks are very influential on me. And Nintendo too. But that Nintendo games are more, Mega Man and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
They're not as moody often.
I would love to talk about the Streets of Rage 2 soundtrack one time. It's almost like proto future funk, but actually from the early 90s. It's really, really interesting because
I think I vaguely remember that, but that actually would be a good episode. Yeah, again, we're not doing just Vaporwave, but for me, one pivotal album in my life was the Silent Hill 2 soundtrack. I don't know how many times I've listened to that one, hundreds maybe of times. I could still listen to it. It's got such a good mix of both sort of ambient and then there's a couple of rock kind of tracks on it, and then I listened to that again and again. And about the same time, I discovered Boards of Canada, which is a Canadian experimental duo, avant-garde, ambient.
They're good.
They had that was when they had a song that was kind of successful, in the mainstream, got in the top 100.
Really?
Yeah, I remember it being played at restaurants and on the radio and that kind of thing. Where I remember people playing it in public. I'm like, oh my God.
Wild.
I can't remember the name of it, but it's a very airy kind of song.
Okay.
And of course, then there's Godspeed You Black Emperor.
Great.
28 Days Later introduced me to them. So I love all this kind of spooky music, but eventually I did kind of I only knew about those. And I tried to branch out from there, but that would be very heavy industrial and drone and stuff like that. And drone doesn't really appeal to me. And there's a lot of ambient that's Silent Hill 2 is very ambient, but there's still enough going on that it's interesting. If it's literally just a looping sound, I can't listen to it. Like it's not interesting to me. So it was kind of like after I got burned out on those, there was kind of like nothing for a while, and I didn't have any music like that to listen to. And then like in 2014, I discovered Vaporwave because I looked through my email, my Gchat. I remember Gchat, Google Chat. Yeah. I remember I looked through my messages and for Vaporwave, look for the first time I ever mentioned it in an email or a Gchat. And it was with Caleb Stokes, also of RPR Fave, and the Mix 6. I was like, hey, I found this new genre of music called Vaporwave. It's really cool. I'm going to listen to it. And like I started listening to it, and I've been exploring it ever since, because I think for me, one of the things is like music is important for me to be doing certain things. I listen to drum and bass during the day, or like when I'm driving or when I'm out, like trying to like, all right, I'm trying to get shit done. I want to be, working out. But then like when I want to write and focus, especially I don't want to listen to drum and bass at like 10 o'clock at night, because I want to be able to go to sleep eventually, especially when I'm writing horror or something like that too. I want something that can help me focus. Vaporwave really does. Certain albums are really good for that. So that's kind of, for me, an important thing in my life, is having that kind of music, to have the soundtrack of my life.
Yeah, I somewhat agree, because I was very into ambient drone. Like the stuff you say you can't listen to, like Stars of the Lid, or like Brian Eno, where it's just like...
Oh, Brian Eno, yeah, the OG, yeah.
Yeah. Where it's just like, this is a 15-minute track, but it has like 5 note changes. Yeah. That type of stuff.
But there's 5 note changes, but it's still interesting.
Oh, it's very interesting. It's all about texture.
Yeah. Texture is a a really important thing.
It's all timbre.
Yeah.
Timbre and texture. This is a technical podcast, folks. But I was also listening to it a little too much. That's when I was in school. So my whole day was like driving 3 hours, coursework, and homework. That was like pretty much my life. And like Vaporwave was a nice way to break that up. Yeah. And have stuff to listen to that was not intrusive to studying.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. There are other things about it, like in terms of like there is an ideology to Vaporwave in all its different forms, and it's sort of this idea of the past that is broken up, and like that's the past that never existed, the future that we were promised that we never got. There's a lot there, but something about that appeals to me. And like for me, shopping malls have always fascinated me as this sort of banal yet like I like things that are sinister, kind of calm, but have a sinister undertone to it. Like shopping malls certainly feature that.
Yeah, my hometown has a kind of a famous dead mall in it. If we're talking about this real quick, that's actually, there's like a bunch of YouTube people, videos of people kind of urban exploring it, and it's very sinister. There's like the ghosts of capitalism are there. And like how could like this great monument to consumerism fail? I
think the greatest thing about malls now is that there's so many art projects being made about them. Like not just like there's Vaporwave, but there's like there's at least a couple of like coffee table photo books about dead malls and that kind of thing. And there's certainly like whole series on YouTube's about urban explorers going into malls, and I just consume all of that. So going back to this podcast, there's so much being made out there. I mean, people know, of course, about Flora Shop, and there's a couple of new albums like that. People who look into Vaporwave on a superficial level will find out about, like Bright New Day, from 2814,
Blank Banshee,
definitely Blank Banshee, probably some of the future funk things like Young Bay or Macross 8299.
Yep,
they're all really good, but there's literally hundreds or thousands of albums being put out. A lot of them are highly derivative. There's actually a big problem, Vaporwave, of artists that are stealing albums and either just downsampling them, like PZA does that.
There's definitely a lot of insincere production issues, especially when it really blew up as like a meme with like Simpsons Wave and stuff. We'll talk about in the future.
Yeah, we'll do at least one. We can do it live. Simpsons Wave.
Where you started to be like these insincere Vaporwave tracks would just be thrown up on YouTube. It would be like, oh, here's Toto's Africa Vaporwave remix. Yeah. And it's like just slowed down with like 30% big reverb on it.
I mean, there are a lot of artists who just want to do it for like their own. Like, I think there's a lot of Vaporwave artists who do it because they want to be able to listen to this music, like which I think is the best motivation for any artist, is like, I want this thing to exist, so I'm going to make it, and because nobody else has made it, and so we want to kind of explore this and share this with everybody in a way that's sort of easy to get into. Listen to this album. For every episode, we'll have at least one album, but we'll also get into theory at certain points. We're not going to be just limited to Vaporwave, though.
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Because I think we also have a mutual love we both talked about like dark ambient, which you mentioned, and how that relates to like horror movie soundtracks.
Yeah, horror movie soundtracks,
and just this overall sinister dread that manifests in other ways.
There's actually a record label for dark ambient, Cryo Chamber, and there's one album in particular. I liked it so much, I listened to it on Spotify that I actually went out to their Bandcamp and bought it, Miles to Midnight. And for me, me, it's very personally very satisfaction because it's a concept album about a haunted hotel that's very spooky. And so like I'm doing a role-playing game about a haunted hotel, and
Unbelievably on brand.
it's very on brand, and it's very listenable. Like it's really good to listen to when you're writing late at night. You want music, but you don't want like something that's too overwhelming, like too like, hey, pay attention to me. I'm this song, you know. And Miles to Midnight is perfect for that. There's a lot of, again, it's also super like cryo chamber stuff has always been super. Everything they put out, like everything that they is very textured. Like there's a lot of like there's a lot of subtlety going on. There's a lot of different little like things going on, and so
it's definitely detailed, involved production. They're almost always on some level pretty evocative, even if they don't always stick with you in the same way as maybe like Miles to Midnight did, but they're at least usually interesting.
Miles to Midnight is actually a compilation from several different artists on the label, not just in name of a specific thing, but like the artist that they put on is like God's Body Disconnect and like shit like that. Like it's great. They have a whole series of albums based on the Cthulhu mythos. Like there's an album that's called Cthulhu. It's one track that's like an hour long.
When Chernobyl was blowing up, they had one that was like all Russian.
Oh yeah,
like Soviet kind of dark ambient stuff.
Oh yeah. Maybe someone we should do something about field recordings too, tucking into like the legacy of number stations, because number stations are certainly going to come up again and again in this kind of discussion. And a lot of these, like I've used those, and if you don't know what number stations are, just wait for us to do an episode on it or Google it. So we want to make this podcast approachable. The whole point of this is to be the beginning point for your introduction into this.
Yeah.
Obviously, when you listen to these episodes, feedback is really important. So like if we go too complex on something, if we didn't hit it enough on a certain subject, let us know.
If you think there's a better album that's a representation of what we're talking about or something, let us know. Like that's how this stuff gets passed around.
And like any conversation, we're gonna branch out from like we're starting in Vaporwave and then dark ambient, but then like we've already hit on like horror movie soundtracks. So I think we're definitely gonna be talking about John Carpenter.
Definitely want to do John Carpenter.
Yeah, not just his actual movies, the soundtracks that he directed that he had other people do, like the Ennio Morricone thing soundtrack. Kind of looking to see how Carpenter directed Morricone, and like of course his own movies too, like and then his newer work, because he's put out 2 albums recently.
I think he kind of said he's done with movies for now and focusing on his music.
I know he's doing comic books too, but like I know I listened to not his most recent album, but one of his newer ones, John Carpenter's Lost Themes. It's a really good album. There's a good variety in there, but like I remember listening to it as Maddie and I drove through the outback between Adelaide to Melbourne, like fucking through the desert at night, and I was like, oh yeah, this is a good soundtrack. Or this is a horrible choice because we're gonna get like run off the road and attacked by like some crazy Wolf Creek asshole, you know.
Just along the same lines, but definitely more of a traditional soundtrack than a lot of what Carpenter did. But always really an influential soundtrack for me was the Twin Peaks one by Angelo Badalamenti.
Like even like the main theme, at least that's beat into my head.
Like Laura Palmer's theme that gets played through a lot. There's actually a really great YouTube video of him talking about how he composed it, because he's just kind of like improvising, and David Lynch was standing over him like, sadder, you're going into a deep, dark woods.
Twin Peaks is one of those things you would think I would be obsessed with, but I've never got into it.
Oh, really?
It's one of those things that for me, it's hard to sit down and like focus on a long form show because I get distracted a lot. So like, I don't watch a lot of shows that are like long form, 20 episodes or whatever, and following the same storyline. One thing is also, I should note, in terms of our criteria, I want to make this clear. This is not going to be a podcast where we like find really bad albums and just dunk on them.
No, it's all about exposing you to stuff that we really like.
Well, stuff we think we should listen to. Like if there's a flawed album, but like if I think it's interesting enough that you should listen to it, but I'll point out the flaws. You know what I mean? Like I'm never going to give you like a totally bad album. We're not going to waste time like that. Like
no, and also I don't want to do like super memey stuff or engage with like the genre as a joke.
No, it's not. It's definitely not a joke. Like I do love Vaporwave. I actually collect the cassettes.
Like unironically. It's really interesting.
I think it's really interesting. I think it's better than a lot of what's being put out there. And it's certainly like the intentions of the artists are like pure in the sense that it's pure artistry. It's not like they're trying to make a quick cash grab in, because like there's no fucking money in Vaporwave.
No.
Yeah. I mean, it is popular as it's probably ever going to be. Like I think some major artists have tried to like get some of the Vaporwave aesthetic to try and steal, and then like it never caught on. So like,
or just in general, there was like a resurgence in 80s nostalgia, of course.
Nostalgia is always going to be big, but like,
there's always that 30-year cycle. But this one has been particularly long, I feel.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of like some of the synth poppy stuff of like the 80s worked its way into like Carly Rae Jepsen's Emotion album, which I actually like. Actually feel, and it didn't do very well, and I think it's because it was like a sincere album that she wanted to make.
Yeah.
It had like a few hits, but I don't
So that's why I don't think Vaporwave is going to sell out, quote unquote.
not yet,
Because like nobody wants to buy it.
Oh my God.
You
What if
can't
we're doing
sell
a
out if
pop?
no one wants to buy it.
We're gonna be doing pop vaporwave in 10 years.
Vapor pop.
Yeah, vapor pop.
I mean, there probably is a thing. There's so many subgenres.
Oh, yeah.
There's vapor trap. I mean,
Oh, of course.
yeah.
I know Soviet wave exists.
Oh, yeah. There's also there's like fascist wave. There's everyone's trying to steal that. Well, yeah. I mean,
Is it just the wave thing? Is it like the equivalent of putting gate on every political commentary?
basically,
Now,
there's
every
waves.
internet-
There's chill wave. There's thousands of waves.
so many waves.
Too many ways. But speaking of ways, we will talk about synthwave at some point.
Of course.
Like there is sort of, it's not a firm line between vaporwave and synthwave. It's
No.
one of the most popular vaporwave / synthwave people out there is Home, all capitals, who did the album Odyssey.
Yep.
Which that one song Resonance has been used in memes all over the place. You see that resonance in vaporwave playlists and synthwave playlists, and
Yep.
yeah, and definitely in Simpson wave.
Yep.
So we're definitely gonna be like not purists in terms of like labels.
Excessive genre purity is annoying.
Yeah, exactly.
Someone who also listens to metal.
Yeah. We'll just be talking about music that's weird and like kind of haunted. We both read a book about vaporwave, Babbling Corpse, Vaporwave, and the Commodification of Ghosts. And it talks about sort of the antecedents of vaporwave, like the idea of plunderphonics.
Yep.
And the idea that the past haunts the present, which several theorists have sort of talked about. We'll get into that, but like, so we're just gonna be talking about like everything around vaporwave and kind of a cloud.
Yeah, treating it as a sort of an entire culture and an aesthetic.
Yeah, talk about aesthetic too. Did you know the solo jazz pattern came from the Solo Cup Factory, which was here in Springfield, Missouri?
Wow, it's like I'm so close to history.
You are so close to history.
so close to history.
My local newspaper actually did a whole article tracking down the woman who did that. She lives nearby, so like,
That's pretty wild.
I mean, it is. And weirdly enough, I've never found like there's so many like knockoff t-shirts that have the solo jazz pattern. I've never found one that like is worth getting because they're all like print on demand ones that are like overpriced and like,
Yeah, like $35.
yeah, I'm not paying $35 for that shit.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like someday I'll find a thrift store one. That'll be the one. You know?
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff to talk about, and I really am excited about this.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. I'm glad that we're finally able to sit down and to start to talk to everybody about it.
The basic format we're going to be going for is like in some episodes we'll each pick an album to review. Some episodes we'll cover one album and then a topic. We'll also talk about doing episodes with guests because, example, our friend Bridget is working on a visual novel and she had somebody do a soundtrack for it.
Yeah, and they posted a few samples to Twitter and in the like playable demo. It's Cry Novel at Cry Novel on Twitter. And the music is really, really interesting.
Yeah.
I really, really like everything that they posted.
Yeah, exactly. So I definitely want to talk about that. We're working on the format and everything, but I think the episodes would be shorter-ish, obviously, than like RPPR or the Mix 6 or anything.
Oh, yeah. This is not a 3-hour actual listen.
Yeah. So obviously, if you have requests or something, we can look at them, but we each have a pretty long list of things to review first.
Yeah, I got a lot of stuff I want to get through. Just,
a mix of stuff that's really popular to stuff that's really obscure, even by vaporwave standards. I would be surprised if like 100 people downloaded some of these albums.
I have definitely trawled through like Bandcamp tags.
Yeah, Bandcamp tags.
Looking for stuff.
There's actually like there's a subreddit for vaporwave, and I've actually spent a lot of time on there and kind of picking good ones from bad ones because I don't know of any other like forums or communities about vaporwave that I'm aware of. I know there's like, you know, people talk about it on social media and Twitter and stuff like that, but like I don't know where the elite meet to talk about vaporwave.
It's probably don't want you to know because even the vaporwave subreddit gets a little sometimes.
Yeah, well, it's a subreddit.
Yep, it's still Reddit.
Yeah. So yeah, I think we'll end every episode with like a preview of what the next episode is going to be about.
Yeah. So I think what we're going to do for the first episode is each of us are going to, in a little more detail than today, maybe talk about like how we got into vaporwave, and then we're going to do the first albums we ever listened to. What was your first vaporwave album?
Yeah, I know. I'm definitely going to dig up those exact chats I had with Caleb to just read some of that.
Yeah.
Like, look at this. I do remember that the very first vaporwave artist I found was called Netscape, but I think the album that hooked me on Vaporwave was infinity frequencies. The infinity frequencies, I still listen to them every once in a while. They do really haunting music, really haunted music, and I really like it.
Yeah, as I said earlier, it was the 2010 release of Echo Jams Volume 1 by Chuck Person.
I think that maybe that's another thing we could do instead of just doing albums is like cover an artist in in a segment, because infinity frequencies has a very specific style that they do, and like every single album has been like very much on that same continuum. They don't like experiment in other ways. It's one album is structurally very similar to the other albums. I mean, they're all worth listening to, but I haven't listened to them in a while.
We can revisit
them. We're revisiting it. Yeah. So we'll talk about what got us hooked on Vaporwave. We'll go on from there. So yeah, I'm really excited about
Me too.
That. All right. This has been Night Clerk Radio.